So I just updated the firmware with some patch to remove a certificate from the UEFI boot certificate authority list or something, and the machine's hung now on reboot. It's been about 5 minutes. There's nothing to say what's happening. Doesn't look like anything's happening. And if I try and switch to virtual consoles, Control Alt F1, F2, F3, I get nothing. Thanks, guys. This happened once before. I think maybe this is what happens every time you try and... Why is Microsoft patches going onto the firmware of the system? I don't know. Because UEFI is a Microsoft thing. These certificates are every piece of boot, every bootloader has to be signed by someone in that chain. And there's some kind of Linux, there's some kind of OS firmware consortium that decides how to release firmware updates, because they've always got to be installed by operating systems, and they decided eventually that Linux was one of them. So I don't know, there's a whole infrastructure down there with websites and things, but the user is supposed to make a decision about installing this stuff. And that's what the decision results in. The user doesn't have enough information. I googled this patch and I couldn't find anything about it. But this certificate was being revoked from, I can't remember what it was. It's in my search history. If I ever get to boot this machine again and look, I don't know, what do I do? Just hit the power button and try again. It really depresses me how crap everything gets. And it's just because there's no unified, coherent vision. There's just a lot of manufacturers and a lot of software developers, and everybody's just trying to rearrange their stuff the best they can to get it to work. And that's what computing is now. There's no coherence anymore. It's just people developing web browsers trying to track the people who are developing websites, and the people who are developing websites are trying to track what browsers they support, and they're all just kind of trying to converge on something that works, but it never does, because people want flashy bells and whistles on their buttons on their web pages, and so they use JavaScript and WebAssembly and things to do this, and then the browsers have to chase the compliance run tests. And in the meantime, the thing just gets harder and harder to use. And they all do it, and it's okay. Because it works, it's great. We never had this before. I mean, we can talk to each other on the other side of the world with WhatsApp, so it's cool. Just hold down the power button until it goes. Try again. If I press enter, do I get a menu? Yes. And I can the keyboard doesn't seem to work. Maybe escape to return to the previous menu. No, that doesn't work either. Enter doesn't work. Enter. Oh, so it wasn't looking at the system keyboard. It was looking at the USB keyboard. Now it's booted. So now I can show you the other amazing thing about Ubuntu and Gnome. I've got two keyboards on this computer. I've got an Apple plugged into the USB, and I've got the built-in keyboard, and I've got a way of choosing keyboards here. I can choose English UK or English UK Macintosh, which is EN2. You can't see that. No, you can't read it. How do I get it so that you can read that? Anyway, if I press Alt, if I press Command or brand space, I get a choice. Brand space brings that up, and I got 2. Brand space, and I got 1, 2, 1. It switches the order. That's Macintosh. So I've switched the keyboard mapping. So now, but if I go brand space, I can switch to this keyboard now. I've changed the mapping to that keyboard. So if I show you what happens, if I type a double quote on the Apple keyboard, I get ats. But if I type ats on the if I type double quote on this keyboard, double quote, I get double quotes. And if I type at on this keyboard, I get ats. But if I type, so I have to change the mapping, and now it works. And I can't find a way. All I want is, obviously, I want the Apple keyboard key presses to be mapped according to the Apple layout, and I want the Lenovo key presses to map according to the Lenovo layout. You would think that would be the kind of way it would work by default, but no, you have to actually manually switch. It can't tell just by pressing the keys which keyboard. I mean, I can't even believe I'm actually having to articulate this. The physical keyboard has a mapping because these letters are etched into the tops of the keys. And that's what's important about a keyboard mapping, not the particular interface that the keyboard is connected by. I would like the keyboard just to work according to what's etched into the keycaps. But you can't do that with Gnome, as far as I can make out. We go through the settings thing. Let's go through the settings and see what happens. Settings. Keyboard. I can choose English UK, includes keyboard layouts, input source switching. I can use the same source for all windows or switch sources individually for each window. I would like to switch mappings, not sources. There seems to be some notion of a source. I mean, maybe some people do want the key maps to be different from what's etched into the keyboard, in which case you would want that, but you don't want that to be at the exclusion of working like you'd expect it to work, do you? But this is all that there is. And keyboard shortcuts, accessibility, launchers. Let's have a look at launchers. These are all disabled. There's only a Control-Alt-T to launch a terminal, and Super F1. I can't remember what the super key is. I think it might be Alt or something. So there are only two launchers, but watch this. If I press Windows 3, that's brand 3, or on here, if I press Windows key 3, watch, I get something opening my home folder. But there's no mapping for that. I don't know why it does that. It's built in somewhere, but I don't know. The reason that I came across that was just because I was trying to work out how to get a hash sign, because the Apple UK keyboard has no hash sign. It usually hash is here, but it's taken by a British pound. So I tried Alt 3 and everything, and I tried Apple 3, which on an Apple would produce a hash, but on Ubuntu with Gnome, it turns out you have to press the right Alt. If you press that and 3, then you will get a hash sign. It took me a month to find that out. These are just small things, but actually when you look into why they happen, you find that there's a total lack of coherent design, because I suppose because there can't be, because nobody knows what devices are being plugged in. But I just get the feeling that these things are solvable. It's not that nobody knows or nobody can do it. It's that nobody thinks it's worth doing. And the number of things that people don't think are worth fixing, like installing firmware and crashing on boot. I mean, the number of different behaviors I get when I boot this machine is really disturbing. There are about five different kinds of behaviors. Sometimes it boots into a color DOS screen. I don't know how to diagnose them. There's so many BIOS settings on this thing for secure boot, and that is a keyboard fingerprint reader. I disabled that because I don't know of any. I haven't installed my fingerprints in the BIOS. Apparently there's some way of actually programming the BIOS with the owner's fingerprint. Well, I bought this machine refurbished, and I had no idea what was going on. It wouldn't boot anything. It wouldn't install Ubuntu the first time anyway, because the partition was nested or something. It's on the edge of just being totally broken. This thing is all the time on the edge of being broken. Cute little animals though.